Backstream podcast, where anything that is verified, validated in the fields of CSR, ESG, and sustainability are right here in this podcast. Today, we are joined by Dr. Ayoola Brimmo. He is the co-founder and CEO of Cycle Technologies AS, a clean tech sustainability startup working at the intersection of AI, waste management, and recycling incentives. Welcome to the podcast, Doctor. Really lovely to have you with us.
Thank you very much, Sarah. A really pleasure.
So we start off our podcast with one of the simplest questions, but also one of the most profound ones. What do you believe is the greatest impact you've achieved so far?
Well, first, I would say it all goes back to having the product market fit. So I have this belief and we have this concept in Cycle that, you cannot actually have so much environmental sustainability without actually having a financial sustainability. So in order for us to actually get to the point where we believe that we are actually having a long lasting impact, we had to actually navigate from having only environmental sustainability to having both also the financial aspect. Correct. So I would say the biggest impact, from our own perspective is reaching that milestone. And we know that is actually going to have multiple folds in the future and then make sure that, what we're doing is not just for the short term, but for the long term.
And in terms of your origin story, so how you came up with your startup, give us a little bit of background of where did the idea come from or where did it start?
Yeah, that's a really interesting one. I don't think we have enough time to go into the whole story, but I'll give you a short version. So I grew up in the southern part of Nigeria and I grew up in a chicken farm. So my greatest lesson, I would say, from a business perspective was actually solving one problem which we had back then, which was basically taking care of the chicken poop.
Okay.
Now, it was a big problem in the farm because every time if you ever been to a chicken farm, the two things they do, they lay egg and they poop.
Yeah.
And you have to take care of the poop. So we had the solution of just digging the hole and putting it in there, but the municipality didn't like that. And we got several warnings. So we had to figure out how do we solve this problem. The light bulb moment came was when we realized that actually the guys in the north, the farmers in the north who grew corn, the supply was corn, need these as fertilizer.
Correct.
So we solved our problem by actually selling them that material. Several years down the line, I found myself in the landfill looking at the big pile of waste. And I did a quick analysis to understand how much of waste is actually in here. Then converted that to money. It was close to $100 million in one landfill alone.
MashaAllah.
And we realized that, wow, there's a huge opportunity here. And then it brought me back to my days of solving the similar kind of problem, taking a problem and then making it more, I would say, of a financial revenue. So we've been so that's where it came from. And this is what the journey we've been trying to do. Obviously, it's not the problem of waste management and recycling. It's not as easy as just shipping, your recyclables somewhere. But I would say we are in the process.
And I think what you've just described is a beautiful win-win scenario. Win for the planet, but also win for your pockets, which is a combination that's a very difficult one to secure in a lot of these startups that are doing good for either people or planet, but they're also doing good for pockets or what they call profits. In your journey with Cycle Technologies, what were some of the maybe challenges you experienced in the beginning of the startup versus where you are today?
I come from an engineering field. I'm very technical in that sense. So I've been very used to working with machines, making new technologies, and that has been, I'll say, my background. Going into the startup sphere, I thought that would be the most difficult part, making the machines, but it ended up being the easiest part. The most difficult part was changing people's behavior. Because in actually trying to have impact, you need people to actually accept a concept and then also help you in trying to understand how can you help them solve it. So getting to change people's behavior towards a more sustainable part, I think, has been the most difficult aspect.
And how did you overcome that? How did you find ways or methodologies that really supported you in creating that mindset shift?
So it takes a lot of learning and unlearning. So first we have to unlearn a lot of our aspect and believing that solutions are mostly just technical.
Correct.
And then learning how you can actually bring about, tangible solutions from a social perspective. So it came from a perspective of me thinking, oh, this is a technical problem, this is a technical solution. To go into a point where I'm saying it's more of a technical and social problem,
Correct.
and it needs both solutions to match.
And in your development of the solution to have a social behavioral shift, what were some of the things that you applied to come up with the most suitable solution for that social behavior shift?
Yeah, so I think that's a really interesting one because that's where we experimented a lot.
I'm sure.
The first thing was basically dumbing down, just taking technology and putting it out there. Nobody uses it because you don't have any social draw to it. Then we start by giving incentives, starting by first financial. And you see demographic of people who go into it, it's still not enough. Then you go to, okay, let's give it to more social, in the sense of, okay, from just not just you getting like being able to get on a bus ride or going to kind of like, buy your pizza, you can also donate it to people like kids in needs that have not have adequate healthcare, and you see a boost there. So you understand that, okay, going from what has worked where elsewhere around the world where it's just only financial, it's not just applicable in copying and pasting in this region. So you need to actually understand that, okay, now that model is what has actually been, I would say, solidified there. We need to be able to also adapt it to the local environment and then use that. So again, moving from financial to then moving into then social and then combining, we have found has worked well in this region.
Phenomenal. I think that's a beautiful intersection to come into the conversation. And maybe for some of our viewers who might not know who Cycle Technologies is, maybe give them a little bit of a brief of what it is that you're actually solving for.
Sure. At Cycle, our value proposition is simple. We try to make recycling easy and more profitable. Easy in the sense that a typical environment is, okay, where do I put what plastic in what place? I mean, what item in what place? Or who is going to pick it? Oh, are they actually going to recycle it? Taking away all that problems from your hand. And the way we do this is by having a technology to solve it, in the sense that it helps you segregate and then maps it to where it's actually going to. So you don't have to think about it. You throw it somewhere. We use AI and our proprietary mechanism to do the segregation, and then it's able to also show you where it's going to give you the rest of mind that is being recycled. And from a financial perspective, making the logistics way more efficient, because about 60% of the cost of the waste management stream is actually in logistics.
Correct.
So using this technology and this concept to make it more efficient then makes it more profitable. So combining both technology and then also environmental sustainability and financial sustainability is where we've been able to actually make the shift.
Impressive. And in terms of where these technologies now exist in the UAE, where have been the most predominant places for you?
Yeah. Also, there has been a learning curve. We started by having these as standalone units in public locations, bus stations, malls, schools, office buildings. And then even now integrating it into the conventional waste management infrastructure. Like, for instance, in the waste chute of a high-rise building or inside a waste truck. So you don't have to go to the technology of the solution. The solution comes to you.
I think that's a key point. And to all those building owners and landlords in the UAE, if you're not talking to Cycled Solutions, I don't know what you're doing for your waste management problem. And maybe just a little bit on the process that you went through with Majra when you verified this project. Tell us a little bit about that experience.
Yeah, so we had to, it was almost like, I would say, an environmental audit. And I would say one thing that kind of actually helped us in this process was, as a startup, a lot of times you try and focus on many things at the same time. Unfortunately, when you do that, some things actually lack some depth. Now, this process made us to actually go a bit deeper into what we were doing from not environmental and then social. From an environmental perspective, because we are very, I would say, techie kind of people, we had done an ESG summary before. But then looking at how, not just what we have done now, what can we do to also improve it was what that process helped us to do, because not only looking at what have you done now, you have to project where you get into. So I would say little things, like I'll give you an example. Very recently, we delivered the machine to one of our customers. And the question was, we don't see a big box, there's, packaging and all these things. And we then give an education. The reason is not because we don't want to put, it's not really expensive, but it's not really sustainable because you're just going to rip it up and throw it away. So these little things, actually, the drop of water then actually helps us to actually increase our, I'll say, environmental impact.
I love that you said drop of water. As you know, Majra means a stream of water. And we always say in Majra, every drop counts, no matter how small. So thank you so much for bringing that analogy into play. Maybe a little bit about your leadership style as a entrepreneur that is a social entrepreneur, but also an environmental entrepreneur. What have been some of the key insights you experienced as a social or environmental entrepreneur here in the UAE, and what would you like to see more?
So personally, my journey has come from me coming from academia. I did do a lot of studying, and I said earlier, one of the main things I had to do was unlearn, in a sense that when I got into, I would say, the entrepreneurship scene, there was a lot of, I would say, they usually, in academia, there's usually a hierarchy, and you know who's going to do what and the person where the instruction is going to come from. So I had to unlearn that and make sure that, people who are part of my team and people who, like I was saying, my colleagues, are the ones also bringing a lot of, direction. This is what you should do. This is what so it wasn't, I had to unlearn from the top to bottom, to start learning the bottom to the top, because that's why you have people around you.
Correct.
Any entrepreneur who believes that they can do it on their own is actually on, I would say, a pathway to failure. You have to actually allow people around you to, raise you up. Like they say, is always, takes a village to build something good.
Absolutely. And maybe just on that point, as somebody who's a leader in this field, where do you see the future of waste management and recycling in the UAE for the next 5 to 10 years?
Well, there's a lot of, I would say, even the Google, they always say if you want to predict the future, you have to look at the past. And look at the past 5 years. I know how it was when we started, from us being one of the first to having it, to actually having, a lot of other players in the place, and then also a lot of companies actually accepting this kind of technology. You have also a lot of legislations that are coming in place.
Yes.
I think, in a nutshell, I believe that in another 5 years, if I go to the landfill, it would not be $100 million worth of material that will be there. It will be something like, 60% less, because people now understand that this is actually money, and there are now easier ways to actually retrieve that money. Because I'll give you an example. Typically, when you want to segregate or you want to, do the sorting, you need humans that would go and they use their, this is plastic, I move it here and this. Now with AI and the advancement of robotics, you can easily just program something to do that very, very easily. Yeah. So I think now is basically a time where it's making more financial sense. So it's just going to go in that direction of where, things become better.
And again, something I learned very early in my career, as far back as 2014, that the waste challenge in the UAE is a 3 billion dirham problem. And one of the things that we talked about is the entire value chain. As you mentioned, there's the user mindset or the consumer mindset, there's the actual segregation, and then there's the sorting, and then there's the actual treatment of waste and then repurposing it. As an entrepreneur who only focused on one part of the value chain, how effective do you think you have been in promoting a transformation of the entire value chain in the UAE?
Oh, I'm sorry. I really like that question because, from our perspective, we always say you have to look at the hierarchy of things. Recycling is in the bottom. You have, reduce, reuse, recycle. And, we always sometimes get, I would say, a interaction between the three that is almost like a competition.
Yes.
When we say, why are you recycling when you should reduce? Why are you recycling when you should reuse? This comes first and all. And I'm like, and we always tell, we even have customers who they are using our technology and they transit into actually reusing. Instead of doing recyclable bottles, they start using reusable cups, and we applaud them significantly for that. Now, the reason why I say this is because I see this more as a football team. The striker will say, I'm the most important. But if you do not have a goalie, you're going to lose a lot of goals, right? You're going to lose the game anyway. So you have the striker, you have the midfielder, you have the... And at recycling, we are still... And I think everybody in the recycling space says this. We are more or less kind of like the goalie. There is a lot of plastic already going into the ocean. Yes. We are trying to stop that while actually at the forefront, reduce and reuse are actually going to score more goals. So I think it's very important that we see it more as a collaboration as opposed to a competition of this is what you should be doing, not that.
And I think something you mentioned as well, which is because 5 years ago there weren't many in the market, and today there are much more players in the market. That sense of co-opetition, which is cooperation and competition, allows you to be very innovative in your approaches, in your solutions. Where there's collaboration, everybody takes a piece of the pie, which is this huge value chain that does require a lot of players to come in together and really work in a collaborative way that creates these win-win scenarios. Yeah. I think something that people might be asking is, the use of AI allows you to see things from a very dashboard style, right? How do you ensure that you're measuring your impact in a really authentic and tangible way within your tool?
Yeah, so also, again, I think it boils down to the financial sustainability of things. When you collect recyclables, I think in the market, especially when you're talking of certain types of materials like PET, plastic, when you're actually going out there to sell it to the recycler, they pay you based on purity. So if, regardless of what your dashboard says, if the person who is paying you is saying that this is dirty, then that is your benchmark. So it doesn't matter so much what the AI says, because that's not what's going to pay you. It's the recycler. So we do measure that from the recycler's input, saying, okay, this is this grade, and we know, okay, this is our impact.
Okay, so it's a little bit of a collaborative model then.
Correct, yes.
If you were to look at it from your perspective entirely, is it the amount of waste that you collect? Is it the percentage of mindset shift of your consumers? Is it the number of consumers that come onto your platform? How do you as a startup measure your impact?
Is a collaboration, is a combination of all of what you have said, actually. Because the more mindset that has been shifted, the more people who will come on board and the more customer who comes in place. So it's all of this together, and it also increases the amount of recyclables which you collect. So from a perspective of measuring that, we are not just looking at the numbers of in terms of the material that comes in, we're also looking at the amount of people who are in place and the amount of locations which we're actually getting to spread out to.
And you did mention in the beginning that you have clientele that come from schools or from communities or building owners. Where do you think you've created the most shift if you were to look at them from a different customer category?
So our primary customers are actually, and I'll say where we have the biggest shift is municipalities and real estate developers. Because they have the biggest impact in terms of cost from the municipality, because they have to take care of the landfill. Also, the real estate developer has to manage the waste, and they pay a lot to do that. So the problem is way bigger for them. So say most of our customers come from that category, and I'll say most of our numbers too come from that category.
Impressive. In terms of the different stakeholders, so whether it's government, whether it's other private sector companies, whether it's NGOs, how can you find ways that, or how would you like these stakeholders to support you in what you're doing?
I say, mashallah, we've had so much support already in this region. We've had the likes of Majra. I think we've given us a lot of, publicity and also authenticity. Today, we have this in most of our email, letting people know that, we have not just been, we're not just saying things. We actually have an external body who has verified us. We have, a lot of, the governmental organizations, or the governmental entities who are our customers. It's not very, usual when you're talking about this from in Europe, in the US, there's a risk kind of aversion from there. You want the company to be way, way older. Out here, it's not so much, easy to just give you a contract, try you out and see you to prove yourself. So there has been support from the government. Also, Dubai just announced that I think in a couple of years or next year, they're going to shut down all landfills, which is basically a policy that kind of supports the mindset shift and the viability of our solution. And you also have a lot of, organizations that are just there to help small businesses as well. So all around, I think these are already there. Where I would like to see some improvement is that as a technology founder, what I have found, what we have seen is that in the hardware space, there's still very, very little players in there. Most of the, the technologies or the startups are working more in the software space, which is way, easy. And, so we have had to actually figure things out ourselves. We didn't have so much help. So what we would like to see is basically coming together of, likewise, people who are, or startups who are actually in the hardware space, to make sure that the next wave of startups do not experience the same.
That's a great piece of insight. I think I never even realized how much more effort needs to be pushed into maybe industries that manufacture these hardwares locally in order to make it more accessible to you rather than importing from abroad. Interesting. In terms of what's next for Cycle Technologies, what is next?
Well, the journey, I think, is, I'll say, we still, I would say, baby steps. Right now, we have managed to kind of have, I'll say, a significant amount of locations. We have now actually had a mindset shift of actually not having, I'll say, localized location where people have to go there, to actually integrating it within the infrastructure. We want to actually, we plan to push that narrative more, where in the sense that we have seen a lot of already success cases. So we're planning to actually spend more of our, say, focus on making it. Again, our goal is to make it easier, even more, even easier than it is right now. Keep progressively making it easier step by step, up until it's actually a no-brainer and everybody just does the right thing when it comes to cycle economy.
You make it sound easy, but there's so much that goes into A, the mindset shift, B, the provision of the technology in the right place at the right time, and then the right partners that would allow you to complete that value chain in a very meaningful way to preserve people, planet, and hopefully make profit at the end of the day. Connecting back to your academic background, how did being selected for the MIT Innovator Under 35 really give you that credibility and visibility in the UAE ecosystem?
Well, I think it was massive. I got that recognition just on the onset of getting into the journey. And I think that kind of gave us that very first credibility, because, as a fresh entrepreneur, for doing this in the first time in the region, you always have that, I would say, aspect of, lacking credibility. So I think this helps to give, the first boost. Also, I would just add that, along the line, there have also been others which have been able to actually help you sustain that. And they are also, I think, not from a general perspective, while this is very, very important, I think, to have that first boost, I think it's also important to also keep up to it, keep making sure that you are actually proving that you didn't just get this by chance, So this has, first of all, given us that first push, and then also kind of kept us upholders to a standard which we believe that we know we have to keep up to.
That's an amazing statement. Our Prime Minister, His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum, and ruler of Dubai, says once you reach one peak, you want to understand where's the next peak. It's not enough just to maintain. So that falls beautifully under that quote. Maybe just a final question on, where are you expanding to? I know you're homegrown here in the UAE. Any plans to go anywhere else, and why?
Oh, yes, definitely. We're now expanding towards, I'll say, our neighbors, the Middle East, which is more of like Saudi, Qatar. And we also have our very big sites in Africa. One insight that an early entrepreneur in West Miami understands or kind of sees is that the size of the market is very, very proportional to the population. So, UAE is not a very high population, I'll say, region. So based on building on what we have actually had a success here, we're trying to use that to move into higher population regions, so we can actually also increase our impact and also our financial revenue.
Phenomenal. I think the first part of that, which is increasing and scaling your impact, is something that we implore all our social entrepreneurs and verified projects here in the UAE to do. We constantly think about, where's our next unicorn going to come from? And can you imagine if that unicorn was a social entrepreneur? It's like 10x what we could do here in the UAE. So Dr. Ayoola, that's really interesting. Could you tell us maybe a little bit more about what the actual technology is and what type of recycling items it can provide?
Yeah, definitely. So we look at it from two perspectives. We have the standalone units, which are basically in the malls or in the bus stations, and the integrated units, which are integrated in the high-rise building, chute, or in a truck. For a typical user, you will walk up to one of our stations, which is indoor and a mall, and then you put in your recyclables. When I say recyclables, it's any type of plastic, metal, or glass.
Interesting.
And the items are basically dropped into our recyclables. Where we stand out from our competitors is that we have a bulk loading where you don't need to stand and put in one at a time. You can put in bulk at a time.
Impressive.
Our AI technology has an area view to scan all of it together and then segregate into different compartments on your behalf. So, and after doing that, you get the exact amount of points, which is collaborative to your recyclables, the weight, the type, the size. And those points you can spend in close to, we have over 100 different partners now, reward partners, where you can go spend it. So it could be a bus ticket, it could be having 50% in pizza, or it could just be, going to a theme park. For the integrated stations, you basically have the same stream flow which you have in your home. You put in your recyclables in the right bin, either in front of your house if it's a villa. When your waste truck comes to pick it up, the items are dumped into the waste truck and it does the analysis and then gives you the reward automatically. For the high-rise building, the same thing, but you just need to throw in your recyclables in a different bag when you throw it through the chute. And on the bottom, we scan through the bag without actually infiltrating it, and then we weigh it up so we know what is inside and also know the quantity. So based on that, you then get your points. So again, I think we started first with a standalone system, but we have realized now that the integrated system makes it easier. And since that's our promise, we go in that direction.
What advice would you give to entrepreneurs building sustainability enterprises in the UAE?
So if you're a young founder who's building a sustainable enterprise in the UAE, and especially in the hardware space, I think the main advice I would give is the route is not conventional in the sense that most of the routes you have here are focused for software. So you have to think outside the box, especially when you're talking about funding. You do not necessarily have to look into the conventional routes like raising from VCs and all. Bear in mind that the government and a lot of entities out there have a lot of grants which you can actually, explore. That has helped us a lot, in our journey so far. And I would say if I was going to start again, I would focus more on that aspect, looking for collaborations that would help us to actually develop our technology from a grant perspective, as opposed to looking for the conventional routes of VCs.
Doctor, it was really a pleasure to converse with you today, and I'm really honored that we have this opportunity to really showcase some of the most phenomenal initiatives and projects that exist in the UAE who are really doing good in their own special way.
Yeah, thank you very much, Sarah. I really also have to thank you guys and Majra for bringing up this platform for us to be able to actually be seen and also be heard. Really appreciate this. Really had so much fun doing this, and I hope we can do this again more often.
Inshallah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, that was Dr. Ayoola from Cycle Technologies with us today, talking about the intersection of AI, waste management, and recycling incentives right here in the UAE. Thank you so much for joining us in the Impact Stream, and we look forward to seeing you in our next episode. See you then.